Hello, welcome to another devotional. I must apologize for last week. I was not able to put any devotionals out at all. But as I always say, my intention is to put out a video, the Lord willing. Well, I would say the Lord was not willing that last week's devotionals go out because I got sick and I was quite miserable for the majority of last week, and so I wasn't able to get any videos done or anything. I had to take most of the week at home and recover from the cold. Just a cold, but a miserable one. So, anyways, that's where I've been. So sorry for missing last week's videos. This even on Sunday, I wasn't able to get a video out, and so at any rate, we're back in the saddle now. You can probably hear it in my voice. I certainly can. And if I start coughing during this, then just understand. But anyways, God seems to be blessing me with a recovery from this cold, so I'm happy about that. Anyway, let's get back to it. So today we're going to continue our look in Proverbs verse by verse, and we're on Proverbs chapter 3, verse 29. And so I'm going to read that in a second, but especially since we've had a week's break, I think it's always important just to remind us of where we've been, what we're doing. So we're in chapter 3 of Proverbs, and this chapter is building this idea of life rhythms. I'm calling life rhythms. Back in verse 19, it tells us how God with wisdom created the universe. And then in verse 20, how even the systems of the earth, he talks about the water in the sky and the water in the ocean and the systems. That he keeps going, that he created a universe that runs by the rules of wisdom and by the moral code of God. And so when we live within the created order, the way God wanted us to, with the wisdom God wanted us to use, we will develop a cycle or a rhythm of life that is the best that can be in this current fallen world that we live in. And so then the verses following that were each kind of emphasizing aspects of a good rhythm of life, a good way to live. And then we got to the last couple of verses, which were, here's some examples of broken rhythms, bad ways to live that will not work well in God's world. So we've been working through those. And here in verse 29, it says, do not devise harm against your neighbor while he lives securely beside you. And what we see in the last couple of verses is this building idea of this kind of like hidden malice or hidden aggression against your neighbor, and this passive aggressive, kind of version. And as we go through these next few verses, we see this worsening aggression, worsening malice. And so this one is like that. It's a step more than the kind of like, well, I'm going to withhold good when it's in my power to do it. Now it's like, I'm going to devise harm against the guy who's living securely next to me. And that kind of an idea of the broken rhythm in life of malice, the idea of having in your heart something harmful to others is a really bad habit to get into, a really bad way to live. And this verse is describing it as against a neighbor who doesn't even know that you've hidden it from him, right? He's living securely beside you. He thinks it's safe to be living there, to be next to you, to be your neighbor. But yet in your heart, you're always devising things that are going to cause them harm. And so there's a broken rhythm there of that you can't be trusted. There's a growing intensity of not only will I not help you, but I actually will be a hindrance to you, though you may not know it. And that's a bad rhythm of life. Some people live this way. A lot of people live this way, and it's really breaks their life down. So that's what this verse is talking about. Don't be that kind of person. So let's go through our 4 questions and examine the idea. Examine the idea a little more closely of this hidden malice. So question 1, why would anyone do this? Is a good question. Why would anybody devise harm against a neighbor when you've got a good relationship? If your neighbor is able to live there next to you safely, why would you ruin that? And the answer to that is kind of opportunism, selfishness, right? When a person sees opportunity to gain for themselves and they don't care about their neighbor, then they will devise harm. There's a bit of a myth in our modern psychology, our modern society, that whenever somebody does something evil, it must be reactive. Right? Where we kind of have this idea that everybody out there is just reacts to bad things. There's just, if you knew their story, you know why they did this terrible thing, whatever it may be. We don't like to think that anybody could, out of the treasure of their own heart, actually do an evil thing. But that's a myth. It's a fiction. There simply is a truth that humans, given an opportunity, will find ways to be worse. we find ways to do harm to each other. That's not always reactive. It's not just because somebody else harmed us. And just logically, if you just think about that, how could that even be? How could it be that people only do bad things in reaction to other people doing bad things? If you follow that trail of thought back, somebody had to be the first. Somewhere, somebody wasn't reacting. They did their bad thing simply out of the badness of themselves. And you'll find that all of us have the potential to do that. Without you, if we don't live in God's wisdom, we don't live by his moral code and his understanding, we will have a tendency to move into a worse and worse state where we will be the kind of people who go, hey, there's an opportunity for gain, and I can do this thing that will benefit me in some way. And yeah, it'll hurt someone else, but I don't care. And that's what can happen. And that does happen. And so people, out of opportunity to gain, will often harm one another, very often. So question 2, what are some examples of this? How can we understand it better? Well, lying, for instance. What lying is it's your devising harm against someone who trusts you, right? They live securely next to you. This is what con men do to people they don't even know. You walk down the street in some city and some con man comes up to you and he runs his scam. He doesn't know you. You haven't harmed him at all. And you think you can trust this stranger. Why would you not want to trust this stranger? And he plays on that trust, tells you a lie in order to gain something from you. That's what a con man does. But it's not just con men that do this. We find this in the more reputable industry of salesmanship, right? We'll do kind of the same thing. They'll play on the trust of the customer and try and sell you a product you may not even need or isn't work quite the way they said it will, but they'll paint it to be really a great product, and they will lie to you. And that's where the saying buyer beware came from in the first place, is because you can't always trust the salesman. But it's not even just salesmen. It's also just people who live next to each other. You and your neighbor, right? It's very possible, if we don't guard our hearts and follow God's ways, that we would fall into a place of lying, gaining the trust of someone so they will believe what we say, and then selling them something that is not true so that we gain at their expense. It's terrible, but it's what we do. And it's the same with other things, not just lying. It's cheating, right? Cheating, right? We all think we're playing by the same rules. And so once we all start playing by the same rules, someone goes, hey, if I break the rules while everyone else keeps them, I can gain an advantage. And so then they cheat, right? Or theft, right? Oh, well, if everybody secures their stuff and they believe that their stuff is secure, but I go around the security and invalidate their trust, then I can have what I want. And there's a lot of other examples we can use, but this is the idea. When we decide to take advantage of someone else's trust in us so that we can have something or whatever, the opportunity for gain, we harm, we devise, we plan, we sneak. It's intentional, and it's not reactive. It's a life habit that we can get into. It's very, very destructive to society, to our own selves. Question 3, excuse me, is it the betrayal that makes it so wrong? Is this why God thinks it's wrong? Because we're betraying a trust. And the answer to that is no. We should never cause harm to someone, even if they didn't trust us. If it's somebody that was not living securely next to us and we harm them, we still are doing a wrong. But there's a greater wrong when they do trust us and we betray the trust because of the incredible vulnerability we put someone else in when we gain their trust and then betray it. So it's 2 sins, not just one. And that's what this is kind of referring to. But this is worded this way in this part of Proverbs because there's a progression of thought. If you read the verses and you see the intensification of the evil way of life, and this is just the next step. It's that sneaky kind of harm. And in tomorrow's verse, the next one, we'll see about the less sneaky kinds of harm. But But it's not just the betrayal that makes it wrong. The point here is that the devious nature itself actually causes harm. Just being devious itself, disguising our malice for someone, takes the whole evil a step further. Um, it, and it also shows very clearly that it's not reactional, that we are devising it, that people don't just simply act on the spur of the moment, but people who don't follow God's ways will learn to plan and intentionally do wrong. And we got to be really careful about falling into that habit. The last question 4, how does this become a rhythm, a habit of life? How does this thing develop into a rhythm, a broken rhythm of malice? Well, any behavior at all can become habitual. We can learn to do it just by the nature of our psychology as a human being. Our minds love patterns and we love routines and rituals because it helps us live. There's a lot of work that our minds have to go through to do something new. And so we naturally form habits of life and systems of life that help us to go through life. And so any behavior we do that we think benefits us, whether it does or not, but if we think it benefits us in some way, so we take advantage of someone, any of those behaviors can form a rhythm or a way of life that then translates into future behavior of similar nature, where we harm people in the future. So it's a habit forming thing. And so you can form a habit of taking advantage of people. You can form a habit of lying. I've known people who become so habitual in their lying that they got to a point where they lied even when it didn't benefit them in any way to do so. I've known people who were so habitually crooked that even when they had a chance to make an honest dollar, they couldn't do it. They wanted to make it dishonestly in some way. I've known people like this, and it's astonishing because you're like, you didn't need to. You could have benefited by doing it the right way, but they were so used to having to be deceptive and manipulative and deceitful that they couldn't do it honestly. They had to go the other way. And the fact is, if you don't teach yourself good rhythms, you will fall into evil rhythms. And this is why in the world we simply can't trust people, by the way. Another Disney fable, but no, you can't just automatically trust everyone you meet. You got to actually be careful because people do devise harm. People will naturally fall into a rhythm of life that's very harmful and not trustworthy. And so we got to be careful about that, but we got to be careful about ourselves and saying, man, I don't want to fall into that. I don't want to be a kind of person you can't trust. I don't want to fall into that habit. So I'm going to actively not do this, right? Not devise harm against a neighbor when he's trusting me. I'm going to actively prevent myself from going down that road and not seeing someone else's trust as an opportunity for my gain. Right? So that's it. For your question for yourself today is just, are you a person, ask yourself, are you a person that can be trusted? Are you safe? Is your neighbor actually securely living next to you, or are you actually not trustworthy because you never know what you might do? Choose better. Choose to live God's way and be someone that's, yeah, you know what, living next to this guy that's a good thing because he's trustworthy. That's what we want. That's what we should want to be. It makes for a better society, makes for a better life, makes you more godly, and you'll just find that everything's better. So God help us to do this, I pray. And